The dust-filled air of Vulture City hung heavy around the stables. As Lillian brushed the old mare, the summer heat pressed down on her back, yet a sudden chill slid through her bones. Something felt wrong. The stable had gone too quiet. No voices, no workers, only the uneasy shuffle of hooves and the soft whinny of horses shifting in their stalls. She paused and turned her head slightly. That was when she heard it. Boots crushing straw behind her. Every muscle in her body tightened. Her heart thudded so hard she felt it in her throat. She turned slowly and saw 4 men stepping out of the shadows. They blocked the exit with their broad bodies. Their eyes held a cold hunger that made her stomach twist. It was the Hargrove brothers, men known across the territory for trouble, cattle rustling, robbery, violence whispered about behind closed doors. They had come through her boarding house 2 nights ago with the same look in their eyes. She had hoped they had forgotten her. She was wrong. "Well, now," a soft voice drawled from the tallest brother, "you are a pretty little thing to find alone in a place like this." Lillian forced her spine straight, even though fear crawled up her skin. "I am not alone," she said, even as her voice trembled. "Mr. Thompson is expecting me to bring his mare back to the house." The tallest brother Emmett chuckled with no humor in it. "Old Thompson is halfway to Prescott by now. Nobody is expecting you anywhere for hours." Her fingers tightened around the brush in her hand as she searched for any way out. The Hargrove stepped closer. The youngest brother, no older than she, was smirked at her. "We have been watching you," he said, "running around town like you own it, turning your nose up at men like us." "There is nothing honest about you," Lillian shot back before she could stop herself. The second oldest moved in fast anger, flashing in his eyes. "That mouth needs teaching some respect," he growled, reaching for her face. Lillian flinched and raised the brush, though she knew it was a weak defense. Behind her, the mare snorted nervously, catching the fear in the room. 4 against 1 does not seem fair, a new voice drawled from the doorway. The brothers spun around. Lillian felt a wave of relief break through her fear. A tall, broad-shouldered cowboy stood framed in the stable entrance. His dark eyes watched the scene with steady calm. It was Callum Kingston from the Diamond K Ranch. She had seen him around, but never this close. He carried himself like a man who knew danger and did not fear it. "This is not your business," Callum Emmett snapped. "We were just talking with a lady." "Did not sound friendly to me," Callum replied as he stepped inside. His hand hovered near the revolver at his hip, calm but ready. Lillian had heard stories whispered about him. Some said he once rode with the law. Others said he ran from it. Looking at him now, she sensed both might be true. "You are outnumbered," the third brother warned, moving toward his own weapon. Callum did not flinch. "Am I?" he asked softly. "Because here is how I count. There is me, the lady, and about 24 ranch hands who will come running the moment they hear trouble, not to mention the sheriff who is mighty interested in finding the men who robbed the mail coach last week. The mail coach robbery. 2 men dead." The brothers stiffened at the reminder. After a tense pause, Emmett spat on the ground. "We were just leaving." "Good choice," Callum said. The brothers backed toward the light and slipped out into the yard. Emmett glared back at Callum. "This is not over." "It is if you are smart," Callum answered without raising his voice. When they were gone, Lillian let out a breath she did not know she held. Her knees shook as she set the brush down. "Are you hurt, Miss Keene?" Callum asked, keeping a respectful distance. "No," she said, though her hands still trembled. "Thank you, Mr. Kingston." "Callum," he corrected gently, "and you are welcome, though it looked like you were about to throw that brush with fine aim." A small laugh escaped her despite the fear still clinging to her chest. "I doubt horsehair bristles could do much harm." "You would be surprised," Callum said with a low smile. "Anything can be a weapon in the right hands." But the smile faded quickly as he glanced toward the exit. "They will not go far." "Not yet. I will escort you back to town." Lillian began to say it was not needed, but the memory of those 4 men changed her mind. "I would appreciate that." As Callum saddled his horse and she finished with the mare, she watched him quietly. His movements were practiced, fast, calm, sure. There was a story in the way he held himself. A man shaped by hard rides and harder choices. "You are not just a ranch hand," she said before she could stop herself. He paused, tightening the saddle strap. "What makes you say that?" "The way you face them, the way you read the room. You have training." Silence settled for a moment before he said, "I rode with the Texas Rangers once." Lillian blinked, surprise and uncertainty mixing. "What brought you here?" "Same as most folks," he said. "A new start." They rode out together down the long, dusty road. The sinking sun painted the desert in red and gold. Callum kept his eyes moving, scanning every ridge and shadow. "Will they really leave?" she asked. Hard to say. Men like them do not give up easy. But they know when odds are against them. When they reached her boarding house, he helped her down from the saddle. For a moment, they stood close. Something warm and uncertain flickered between them. "Lock your doors tonight," he said. "I will be keeping watch." Lillian nodded and stepped inside her home. For the first time in months, she felt something new settling in her chest. Safety. But danger was not done with Vulture City yet. And the next sunrise would bring news that would shake the whole town. Morning light spilled across Vulture City, but instead of the usual noise of miners and wagons rolling down the street, a strange silence hung in the air. People stood in small groups, whispering in tight voices. Lillian felt the tension the moment she stepped onto her porch. Mrs. Peterson hurried toward her with a hand pressed to her chest. "You heard the news, child." "What news?" Lillian asked, as a cold prickle crept up her spine. The Hargrove brothers were found dead at their camp outside town, all 4 of them, shot clean and precise. Sheriff Davis just rode back in with the bodies. Lillian swallowed as her heart beat hard against her ribs. Dead. 4 men who had cornered her less than a day before, gone overnight. The town moved with buzzing whispers that rolled like storm winds across the street. "Who did it?" she asked. "Nobody knows," Mrs. Peterson said. "Sheriff says there were no witnesses, no tracks clear enough to follow. Just bullets placed with an expert hand." Lillian felt the ground shift beneath her. Only one man she knew could shoot like that. One man who had stepped into the stable like fate itself. Callum. Later that afternoon, he knocked on her door. His hat was in his hands, and his face steady but unreadable. "May I come in, Miss Keene?" She stepped aside and let him into the small parlor. The walls seemed to shrink with the weight of all the unasked questions pressing between them. "People are saying the Hargroves were murdered," Lillian said, watching him. Callum nodded. "I heard." "The sheriff thinks it has something to do with the mail robbery," she continued. "He thinks maybe some of their partners turned on them." Callum held her gaze without blinking. "What the sheriff thinks is for the sheriff, but those men will not trouble you again." His voice was calm, yet carried an edge that made her breath catch. She knew he was hiding something. She also knew he would not tell her unless he chose to. "Did you?" she began before she could stop herself. "I was at the Diamond K all night," he said smoothly. "Ask any ranch hand there. We had a foaling mare that kept us busy until dawn." He said it with certainty. He offered no doubt, but in his eyes something flickered just once. Something quiet and buried and heavy. Weeks passed, and life in Vulture City settled back into its dusty routine. Rumors kept swirling, but never touched Callum directly. He started stopping by her boarding house more often. Sometimes he brought fresh game. Sometimes he fixed things she had been putting off. A loose shutter. A cracked porch step. A stubborn fence post. He worked with calm strength and spoke little about himself. The mystery around him only deepened. But instead of frightening her, it pulled her in. His presence steadied her like a warm hand on her shoulder. One evening, as the sun dipped beyond the rooftops, Lillian sat with him on her porch. She told him about her father, a schoolteacher who had brought her west after her mother died. A man who believed learning could change a life even in a hard land like this. "He sounds wise," Callum said. "He was," she said softly. "He would have liked you." "Would he?" Callum asked, and for the first time she heard doubt in him. Men do not usually favor former lawmen with a past full of shadows. "My father judged actions, not history," she said. "You showed me who you are in that stable." Callum looked away, his jaw tense. "Not all my actions would stand up to that kind of light," he said quietly. Before Lillian could answer, hoofbeats pounded down the street. Sheriff Davis pulled up fast, dust swirling behind him. "Kingston," he called out. "Need a word." Callum rose. "I will be right back." Their voices drifted low and sharp across the yard. When Callum returned, his expression had changed. The softness was gone, replaced by a steel calm she had only seen in the stable. "I need to leave town for a few days," he said. "Trouble north of here. The Hargroves had friends. Some have been asking questions." Fear gripped her heart. "Are you in danger?" "Nothing I cannot handle," he said, but his tone was not as certain as his words. "Still, I would feel better if you stayed with Mrs. Peterson until I return. Her place is closer to the sheriff." "I cannot just leave my business," she protested. "Please, Lillian," he said quietly. It was the first time she heard her name from his lips. It sounded different, safe, warm, real. "2 nights," she whispered. "No more." Relief crossed his face. "Thank you." Before he left, he reached into his pocket and held out a small pistol. "Take this. For protection." "I do not know how to shoot," she said. "Point and pull," he replied. "But you will not need to." Then he was gone. Lillian stayed with Mrs. Peterson for 2 nights, but when Callum did not return, on the 3rd she went back to her house. On the 5th day, the rumors grew ugly. That Callum had fled, that he had been the one who killed the Hargroves, that the law was closing in. She refused to believe any of it. And on the 7th night, when she awoke to a soft tapping at her back door, her heart leapt to her throat. She grabbed the pistol with shaking hands and crept downstairs. "Who is there?" she whispered through the wood. "It is me," Callum answered, his voice strained and rough. She swung the door open and gasped. He leaned against the frame, his shirt soaked in blood, his face pale under the moonlight. "My God, Callum!" she cried, pulling him inside. "Sorry for dropping in late," he said with a weak attempt at humor. "What happened?" she demanded, already gathering water and cloth. "Ambush," he answered. 3 men, friends of the Hargroves. As she cleaned the deep cut along his ribs, she felt her hands shaking. Callum, his jaw tight with pain, finally spoke the truth he had been avoiding. "Those men were part of the gang the marshals have been hunting," he said. "The night the Hargroves died, the marshals caught up with them. They came to question me because of the fight in the stable. So the marshals killed them," she whispered. Callum nodded. Officially self-defense. Unofficially they wanted to shut down their whole operation. "And the men who came after you?" he asked. "Them, and more. There will be others." Then he looked at her with a tired honesty she had never seen in him. "Lillian, I have to leave Vulture City, and I cannot come back." Her breath caught like a hitch in her chest. "Leave for how long?" "For good," he said quietly. "As long as I stay, you are in danger too." Her heart twisted with a fear she had not expected. Was he really going to ride out of her life forever? Unless he said softly, "You would consider coming with me." The words hung between them, trembling with something new and terrifying and full of hope. Lillian stood frozen as Callum's words sank into her heart. Come with him. Leave Vulture City. Leave everything she had built after her father's death. Leave the only place she had known for years. The thought should have scared her more than anything those brothers had ever done. But it did not. Callum watched her with a quiet strength, waiting for her answer even as blood stained his shirt. His eyes held a question and a fear that surprised her. For the first time, she saw the man behind the calm, steady mask. A man who feared losing her. Lillian took a slow breath and stepped closer. "Yes," she said with certainty, "I will go with you." Callum blinked as if he had not expected her to agree so quickly. "Lillian, there are things you are not thinking about. You would be giving up your home and your work and everything you built." She shook her head. "There is nothing here for me except memories of struggle and danger. You are the first thing in a long time that makes me feel hope again. If you leave, I am not staying behind." He searched her face for hesitation but found none. His hand rose and cupped her cheek gently. "From the moment I saw you stand against those men," he said softly, "I knew I wanted a life where you are in it." They married 2 days later in a quiet ceremony at the preacher's small chapel. Only Mrs. Peterson and the ranch foreman from the Diamond K stood with them. Lillian wore her best blue dress. Callum wore a clean shirt and his hat rested respectfully in his hands as he made his vows. The next morning they left Vulture City. Lillian sold the boarding house to Mrs. Peterson's son and used the money to buy a wagon, supplies, and a small herd of cattle. Callum moved with steady confidence despite the healing wound at his side. Every few miles he looked her way as if making sure she was still there, still certain, still ready. "I am not turning back," she told him with a smile. Their journey to Colorado tested them harder than either expected. A flash flood tore through a canyon, forcing them to take a treacherous trail along the cliffs. A wagon wheel snapped, leaving them stranded for a full day, while Callum repaired it with nothing more than rope, a spare board, and sheer determination. One night, a mountain lion crept near their camp. Lillian grabbed a burning branch from the fire and shouted until the creature fled back into the dark. Callum stared at her afterward, half surprised and half proud. "Remind me never to cross you," he said with a tired smile. Through hardship, something strong began to grow between them. Trust, respect, love. Callum watched her with a quiet amazement as she learned new skills every day. Lillian watched him with a warm, steady pride as he faced every trial with calm strength. At night they sat beside the fire, sharing pieces of their lives that had never been spoken aloud. She told him stories of her father's dreams of a school. He told her about the rangers who had raised him like family. He shared the moments that haunted him, the choices he could not change, the things he wished he could forget. And she never turned away. By the time they reached Colorado, the foothills were covered in the bright colors of autumn. Callum's friend, a former ranger named Morgan, greeted them and led them to a valley tucked between 2 ridges. A creek ran through the center and tall pines lined the far side. The land felt quiet and safe, like it was waiting for them. "It is perfect," Lillian whispered. Almost Callum said, "It will be perfect once we build a life here together." They built a small cabin before winter set in. The walls shook in the wind, and the roof leaked in the first storm. But they worked together to fix each problem. When Callum fell sick with fever in the middle of the coldest week, Lillian stayed beside him for 3 days straight, pressing cool cloths to his skin, praying he would not slip away. "Do not you dare leave me," she whispered through tears. "Not now, not ever." Callum opened his eyes on the 4th morning and smiled weakly. "I told you I do not plan to leave." By spring, the valley felt like home. The cattle had healthy calves. Their crops took root in the warm earth. The cabin grew room by room until it welcomed sunlight like a proper house. Travelers drifted by, and soon the small valley became a community. A preacher blessed their land. A family stayed with them for a week and paid with seeds from fruit trees. Lillian began teaching children who lived nearby, starting her father's dream of a school. The years passed gently. Their son Charles came first, strong and curious. 2 years later, their daughter Emma arrived, bringing bright laughter to the valley. Callum built them a swing under the cottonwoods. Lillian taught them letters and stories of faraway places. Sometimes, news from Arizona drifted north. The outlaw gangs connected to the Hargroves were scattered. Vulture City had grown and then fallen again as the mines emptied. No rumors mentioned Callum. No one came searching. "Maybe there is no one left to look," he told her one night. Still, his eyes watched the horizon every time riders approached. Old habits from a hard life did not fade. On the 5th anniversary of their arrival, they held a gathering with neighbors. Music filled the air. Lanterns glowed. Children chased each other through the grass. Laughter drifted through the warm night. Callum took Lillian's hand and led her up the small rise overlooking their land. the same place they had stood years earlier. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly, "leaving everything behind, coming with me?" Lillian looked at their home, at the strong cabin, at the bright windows, at their children running through the yard, at the people who had become friends. "Not for a single moment," she said. "That day in the stable life gave us a chance to choose something better. We took it together." Callum drew her close and kissed her with the same steady promise he had carried since the day he stepped into the stable to face 4 dangerous men. Below them, their valley glowed with warm lantern light. The land they had built with their own hands stretched wide and safe, a place of new beginnings and second chances. Lillian rested her head on his shoulder. "Those 4 men almost ended my life," she said softly. "Instead, they led me to this. To us." Callum's arm wrapped around her as the stars shimmered over the Colorado sky. In the quiet night, she felt the truth settle deep in her heart. They had not escaped their past. They had built their future. Together.